You have some new guests or?
New guests. They are here for the first time. 4 different guests from all London area and coming from various different backgrounds.
Right.
So if Huzur permits, they can present their self-introduction before the questions.
Most welcome,
Please.
please.
Dr. Peter.
Peter Holmes from the University of North London, here in a private capacity. I'm head of a humanities department.
Whereabout is the university being situated where you had this department?
In Holloway Road in North
Holloway
London.
Road?
Yes.
Holloway Road, right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, you possibly know Holloway
How
Road.
many? Yes, I know, of course. And how many students do you have there?
We have about 12,000 students.
2,000.
And within my department we have 4,000 students.
It's a big number.
It's big, yeah.
Please.
Josephine Morris. I come from northwest London as well. I'm a mother of 3 children. I'm a Christian. I work as a housing association surveyor. I work for the largest black-led association in London.
Sort of philanthropist work?
Our association is a charity.
That's right.
But
Yes, yes.
I
And
work.
you're a regular employee of the
I am.
charity?
Yes,
That's right.
a salaried employee.
Please.
Good morning, Your
Morning.
Holiness. My name is Sue Collins. I work for the London Borough of Croydon Social Services, and I'm here today to talk with you.
Please.
I'm Sheila Hill from Carlshorton in Surrey. I work for the Sutton Social Services as a foster carer.
Are you from the Caribbeans originally?
Yes, Guyana in
Guyana,
South
yes,
America.
that's right, yes. So shall we begin with the beginning, please?
Yes. Today much interest is expressed in behaviour in schools and the way in which children perhaps are not behaving as they would be expected to. Does your community have a view on the appropriate way in which education should teach children?
First of all, permit me to differ with the question itself. You said they're not behaving as they were expected to. I think they're behaving exactly as they're expected to by the society, by the social environment, and the new trends of society towards permissiveness and lack of responsibility. So what else could you expect? The children are always a reflective mirror of the elders, but only they do not pose while the elders do. That is the difference. So in that sense perhaps your question is right. They think they would, when they consult this mirror, they would see an image of what they want to be produced. Hypocritically, I mean. What the children reflect is the real image. So we begin reform where it should begin, at the root cause. And unless great changes are brought about in the social behavior of the elders, of the society in general, I mean, children cannot be suppressed into any submissiveness, nor can they be reformed by legislations and things, by changing the school laws and whatever you may like. I feel this is not possible because they are bound to represent the inner picture of their parents in the society as such. I have not enlarged upon this because I know you have understood exactly what I meant. So there is no need to further develop this theme and explain why and how I mean these things are happening. But I think it's very clear that people know it deep in their hearts, that the social pattern is getting out of the hands, and the British people as such are facing a real big crisis. Please.
How do you feel that our religious communities can together help the racial disharmony in this country?
Again, the same is the answer. The religious community must search for the reasons why it has lost hold on society. It has indeed. By trying to regain the control over an area of ideologies, faith, doctrines will be a futile effort, because it is not there that the faults lie. The faults lie in the duplicity of the church as whole, of all religions, I mean. They are interested only in the area of ideologies, while in the moral lessons or the moral messages of their faith, they are practically least interested. When you turn to the civilization today as such, the European or Western civilization, tell me, do you find Christianity being displayed at all, at any level?
Very few levels.
You see? In your politics, in your economy. So, the fathers of the church, they're not interested in Christianity. They're interested in the dogmatic control of their command. They want people to follow what they believe Christianity should be, only in the realm of ideas. In practical terms, Christianity started beating retreat around 200 to 300 years ago, when it compromised with the changing values, philosophies, growing permissiveness, and so on and so forth, and did not take effective measures as long as the Christian church was bowed to and paid homage to by the society in general, and they accepted their superior authority. They didn't bother much as to what was happening to the Christian values. So this is my humble analysis of the whole situation with regards to the church, and the same, I must assure you, applies to the world of Islam. Worse than this in many cases, because the ideologies which are being presented on behalf of Islam are so distorted and so beaten out of shape that they are no longer recognizable as the ideology of Islam. But with one difference, that they also want to enforce those ideologies. And when the twisted ideologies are enforced, then naturally the impact on the society will be most shattering. This is what happened in Iran, this is what happened in other Muslim countries, and is happening in Egypt, in Algeria, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere. But you have left this phase of your history far behind, 200-300 years ago. So you have walked clear of that, very threatening atmosphere through which sometimes the religions pass. I must, in the end, advise you, if you can do anything about it, to advocate the Christian values to the society in every level. Not only forgive and be kind to the Africans and so on and so forth. Christian values must be displayed in all areas of human moral behavior. On the one hand, on the television you show and promote shameless display of sex and whatever belongs to sex, and on the other hand you advocate the Christian values and champion the cause of Christianity. How can they go hand in hand together? It's impossible. So if you have the courage and you have the strength to raise an honest, clear voice against this duplicity, this duality of the character, then of course there will be some hope, but not otherwise. Thank you. Please.
I work with adults who have physical, learning and mental health disability.
Yes.
I'd like to know, sir, what services do you provide within your community for those people?
In fact, the most important service we provide is apparently not recognizable in this area. But this is most important because it belongs to the root cause. I believe most of the problems we are confronting in relation to the behavior of the children and psychological reaction of the society, of the children to a society, which becomes visible in their mental diseases and attitudes, etc. But it is a sort of rebellion against something they don't like. And it is there that we find it highly important that there should not ever be permitted any generation gap. It is a generation gap which is most dangerous. When one generation flies in an atmosphere which has no relationship with what's happening below at the level of children and the new generation to come, then they're free to do whatever they like, and the children seem to be free to do whatever they like. And apart from the factors which I have already explained, this generation gap renders the parents to be helpless in passing their traditions, their noble traditions, on to their younger generation. So they are two different wheels moving in different areas without a clutch in between. I think in our society, this is what we do not permit to happen. Not by legislation, of course, we have no force, no coercion, means of coercion, but we promote children to remain close to their parents and find haven not in the streets but in their houses, haven of peace to which they return. And this is very successful and very productive. In the Ahmadi families, if you make a survey, you will be amazed at how the children are inward looking, because they have their aspirations in their parents and they receive effective love from the parents to satiate their desire, their innate desire to be loved, to be taken care of. So the result is that we create happy families and happy homes. And I think this is the answer to many of the problems you face today in England and elsewhere in Europe. Or of course in America perhaps it's gone too far away now, out of our reach. But in Europe I think the point of no return has not reached. There are many fundamental differences now between European and American societies which are not visible to many, but I can see very clearly that they are becoming two different societies now. In Europe, cultural values, social values, family concepts and the respect for the family to be kept intact, these are not completely wiped out. In fact, I see a growing desire in the Europeans' mind and heart to return to this value, this family pattern of society. Because during my question and answer sessions, I always feel the urge within the people's heart to somehow protect the families. In America, it's a matter of bygone days. They have been split into individuals so cruelly that each individual is free to what he likes, and this is the sum total of American society. So I advise you to follow our pattern, which has successfully demonstrated to the world that this is the way to bring a peaceful atmosphere, to bring about a peaceful atmosphere which will naturally induce peace to the children and also to the parents, and they go hand in hand together into the next generation. Even when such parents die, their values are passed on to the next generation, and this continuity is highly important, because this continuity means not revolution but evolution. In the society where there is a break between the older generations and the new generations, there is always the danger of revolution. And revolution can take place in any direction. Right? Please.
I would like to know how, if your religion accept homosexual or lesbian.
Our religion is in perfect agreement with the book, the Old Testament and the New Testament in this regard. Why were the two townships were completely erased from the face of earth by God, as we read in the Old Testament, at the time of Lot? If God had approved of this. So as far as the religious aspect is concerned, the answer is very clear. I don't see why people cannot read this message. It's impossible to have hold a different view than the one expressed in the Old Testament in relation to God's measures to destroy such a people and wipe them out. What manner of God that would be who acquires a completely different attitude towards the same evils? Moreover, unfortunately, the people of this age fail to read behind the lines, between the lines, I should say, when they do not analyze why this turn made by God. What is the philosophy? Why other, even more heinous crimes are overlooked? And this particular crime is taken up out of all proportion so seriously, with such grave consequences. Why? The reason is very obvious. Because the punishment must always be in accordance with the nature of the crime. This is the nemesis, not of nature but of God. Now, why was sex created in the first place? Why was pleasure placed in any human act or experience? The buds of senses, all five senses, were created specifically to vouchsafe the survival of species with the help of some bait, that is the pleasure bait. Like you train your horses with the help of a few sugar cubes and things. So it is the pleasure attached to an act which in fact helps the act to survive and to be supported and strengthened. If you read your evolution, the book of evolution, not from the Darwinian point of view but from the point of view of development of five senses, you'll be amazed to find how right I am in this respect. The sexes are just but a manifestation of the same principle of teaching life values by giving them some bait. And when they bite, then they enjoy that, and then gradually they are drawn into the course of higher evolution, spiraling up and up. So this is how the sex was created, to guarantee the survival of species. If no pleasure was attached, perhaps we would already have been extinct, because taken this out from the act of conjugation, the rest is boredom and responsibility. Responsibility which people shun and try to just get the pleasure part without sharing the responsibility born out of this. So, because you deny the means for survival by rebelling against the dictates of God in this particular area, you want to run away with the pleasure which was just incidental, not objective. not the purpose of this exercise. What would you expect? All right, if you don't want to survive, do not. Be extinct. That is the message which was given then. And it is the same message which is being given by the aids today to the modern society. Because the means at God's disposal are different. He does not have to repeat the punishment with the same measures. But the ultimate net result of, or the net style of the punishment would be the same. Net purpose of the punishment would be the same. So I can read this message openly and clearly in the aids which is designed particularly to hit at the homosexual society. The rest also goes with it, of course. But a society which has become permissive to the extent that it becomes homosexual and growingly so, and when the church accepts this as a religious behavior, correct religious behavior I mean, then although I believe it began with the growth of homosexuality, but it would not stop at punishing only the homosexuals. The whole society which is moving in a direction where the ultimate fruit that is born is homosexuality. Pursuit of pleasure, 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 and nothing but pleasure. This is what has evolved into the ultimate, sense of just enjoyment, pleasure, and not having the botheration of any marriage or children or raising up of families and so on and so forth. So this is my personal understanding of nature as I see it. And if you still insist that homosexuality should be legalized and the church should bow down to these pressures, then it's up to you. Please.
Should there be state-funded Muslim schools?
No, I don't think so. Not at all. Because this will create rifts in the society, and once they begin to take place, then the whole society will be split. In an area which once given support can become very dangerous. Already you are suffering so much from these problems which we have just been discussing. Add to this the Muslim schools, the Hindu schools, the Sikh schools, and then within the Muslim, the Shia schools, and the Sunnite schools, and the Brahmi schools, and the Ahmadi schools, and so on and so forth. And then the Catholics have their separate schools, and the Protestants have, and the Church of England have their own separate schools. Once you accept the edge of the wedge to be driven, then it knows how to make a bigger hole. So this is a very dangerous area of exercise against which I once warned your then Minister of Education. I met him and I told him clearly that this is absolutely dangerous exercise. Don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, because, as I said, this is the beginning of the end, not the end of the beginning. So I hope this is sufficiently warns you against this and the why I do it. What I emphasized instead was to promote religious values in secular schools, not the religious ideologies. If your society is represented by some major religions like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, etc., why not welcome them to give their idea of how people should behave morally, how the children, the parents, the society, the teachers, etc., and as such accept that, because there is no danger. And seldom will you find any real difference between the moral teachings of any religion and any other religion. all religions practically go hand in hand as far as the moral values are concerned. Although some things are emphasized in a way which people normally do not understand, like if you're sticking on one cheek, offer the other one. This is not a permanent teaching. This was a reaction to the Judaic overemphasis on revenge. But basically the teaching is the same. So as such, forgiveness where forgiveness is required, revenge where revenge is required, this is the common feature of all religions, expressed differently, less perfectly or more perfectly is not the question. The question is they share these values. So why not introduce these values? This is what the British society so much needs. So return to religion as a society, only in the areas of commonality, not in the areas of differences. This is my humble advice, and I hope the lesson will be taken in time. Please. Thank you.
What do you feel about the fatwa placed on Salman Rushdie?
I have repeatedly mentioned this question, and it's rather late to repeat the question, isn't it? But in short, I'll say, once I said in answer to such a question that I strongly condemn Salman Rushdie for what he did, but not to death. That is how I read the Quran. You condemn an evil behavior, you condemn a vulgarity against whomever it is addressed. But vulgarity is not condemned to death, particularly with regards to the religious doctrines, dogmas, concept of God, etc. There, the difference of opinion is defined as blasphemy. So, according to the Holy Quran, blasphemy must be condemned, but not physically. Blasphemy must be condemned, but the punishment of blasphemy must be left entirely to God. And the humans have no role to play in this. Right? Please.
So, excuse me. So I would like to ask you about your own religion, Muslim religion, and about whether a man in your religion can take more than one wife.
I think again there's no difference whatsoever in this, because according to the Judaic teaching, and remember, Islam is a continuation of the same tree. Although it has grown higher in stature, but every tree does so. With the passage of time, it grows bigger and bigger and shoots out in all directions. So Islam has never claimed to be a completely new religion. Islam always claims, and so clearly and categorically, to be the summit of religion as grown on the previous stock. So Judaic values which have not been changed by Islam still remain valid. And religiously, the Old Testament is absolutely clear that there no condition was laid on the maximum number of wives except by way of advice. The Prophet should not do that much, that sort of thing. And they should stop where they should stop. Such expressions are found, of course, scattered over the Old Testament. But you know how many wives did Solomon have, did David have, and others, so many others, and Abraham and Isaac. So with this history at your background, how could you expect something different from a religion which is created by the same source, that's God? but with one difference. Islam in every respect has taken up the same principal teachings but has trimmed it to a better form, more suitable to the society of the time. So as such, what Islam did was that first of all it placed a restriction on the number. It is always misread in the verses concerned by some people as if a permission is being granted. On the contrary, a permission is being withdrawn and a limit is imposed on the number of wives. That is the first thing we meet in those verses which speak on this subject. So, and again I must say, although some Christians tried their best to prove from the New Testament that this teaching was cancelled, it was not cancelled by Jesus Christ, not at all. So whatever was not cancelled, and he himself admitted that he had not come to cancel or change the teaching of the Old Testament. He had come to perfect the teaching, and the perfection is always in the same line. It is not contrary to what has been said. So anyway, let's leave it as debatable, but what Islam does is this: number one, it permits more than one wife under certain conditions. And the conditions I am speaking of are those of wars and their aftermath. This is exactly in which context this restriction on the number of wives is placed in the Holy Quran. Evidently, the Arabs were free to have any number of wives, so were the Jews, not practically so much, but in reality they were permitted. But what Islam did was that after the first battle, there was a problem at hand of so many prisoners of war, so many orphans and widows and so on and so forth. And imagine if there are no separate war camps which are run by states, which is a situation which prevailed over the world almost everywhere for many, many long centuries, or maybe right from the beginning of time to the most modern times. No war camps were organized anywhere. The prisoners were distributed to the people as such, particularly to the families of the soldiers who had participated in the war. So what would be the position of Muslim men and Muslim women in a society where orphans are created at large number, where second marriage is not permitted, where the widows, young widows, are left to the mercy of maybe wolves and so on? So the only respectable, sensible answer is to permit them to have more than one wife, because wars always leave in their wake a society where the number of men decreases and the number of women increases. It has happened in recent wars in Europe, you know that. So what would be the answer if you do not permit men in such situations to marry more than one wife? What would happen would be illegal marriages, unauthorized marriages, subtly held and carried out, would be the natural outcome of such a society. This is exactly what happened after the World War I. This is what happened after the World War II. And your moral degradation, if you admit that to be moral degradation, is invariably linked to this phenomenon. The moral concepts, standards, and promiscuity, etc., were completely different before the World War I. And the first notch down is noticed after the World War First, and then after this World War Second is a landslide. But same were the factors. A society which did not permit to have two wives, the husbands were free, and the young widows were also like freelance roaming about, and they could not be completely suppressed in their desires and needs. So they would rob married women of their husbands in their offices, in other places, and practically you were permitting having two husbands or two wives to everyone. So the measures of restricting the society to one woman, one husband are broken down by the pressure of the new situations. So the Holy Quran permits that with reference to the war situation, but it does not restrain it only to that, because there are other possible requirements of human society where, for instance, one is married to a wife who is sterile, who cannot bear children, but the husband and wife love each other. They don't want to be separated. I know many such situations happening in our community, and they decide that the husband should marry again for the sake of children, and the first wife and the second wife live like sisters because it's a matter of mutual advantage. So in these situations as well, the permission is not withdrawn, but the restriction is definitely laid on the upper limit. You may marry, but not more than 4 times. And this is the first limitation we learn in the religious history imposed on the number of wives. But with one condition which further restricts it, practically to 1. Because in the beginning, the Holy Quran says, because for the sake of the dictates of justice in the society, we permit you to marry more than once. It's not the words we permit, but you can marry more than once, twice, thrice, 4 times. In the end, the verse says, but if the dictates of justice require that you should not marry more than once because you cannot keep balances between the 2 wives, if you cannot treat both wives perfectly justly, then you are not permitted to marry more than once. And unfortunately, in the Muslim world, although it is rare that people marry more than once, but whenever they do, most often we observe the violation of this overriding principle that when you marry again, be careful that you will have to be just to both the wives so perfectly that if you tilt the balance in favor of one, you will be held responsible in the sight of God. So this is the not whole story, but the gist of the Islamic teachings and the reasons why it is so.
Why does the Muslim faith take such a strong stand on alcohol?
Don't you know the answer?
I don't really, to be honest.
What
I
do
can't see
you
why.
see around? If you read, if you analyze the root causes of all crime which is being committed in any alcoholic permissive society, alcohol permissive society, if you read the expert's opinion, you'll be amazed to find how alcohol is destroying the peace of the society as such. Because alcohol has that quality in it to draw you on and on, to carry you on and on beyond the limits of your control. And when this happens, and mostly it happens more vividly in the labor classes, in the poor classes, that because they do not have they do not return to a home which is so beautiful, so wonderful, so peaceful, and their wives are practically living a life of drudgery. Although the press does not give voice to it very often, but occasionally it does. When they return after having drunk from the pubs to their homes, very often they are so cruel to their wives, to their children, and the economy at that level cannot in fact support the luxury of drinking, not to that extent at least. The result is that your economy is being leased by this habit of drinking, this custom of drinking. And the drinking does not go alone. It goes hand in hand with nonsense, with permissiveness, with pursuit of luxury, with skirt chasing and so on, what they call it. The result is that it is this trend which has ultimately led you to the drug addiction at last. Because the alcohol has this quality, this property of creating the demand for more, because the previous level of alcohol which you were used to drink would not create a kick after a while. So you want some more and some more. At last, the society is accustomed to drawing these what I call kicks of something, exhilaration, excitement, to create vibration within you of some sort, through by the means of alcohol and drugs, etc. So it's a journey which is continuous. It had to end up in drugs. It has ended up in drugs. So again, as far as the economy goes, I once discovered that the earnings of the British, which goes towards maintaining their habits of drinking alcohol, the drain is so big that if they abstain from drinking for 1 week altogether, the money they save can support a poor country for 1 year for maintaining their livelihood, or life support, minimum food, shall we say. So the society has gone too far away in the direction of such spendings which are creating further chain reactions in the society in all areas of human interest, not only in the areas of pleasure seeking. Load on your economy is growing. With that load, whenever there is a challenge to the economy, because there always are challenges to some interest-built economies of a nature which you can never avoid altogether. You can delay the impact, but you cannot avoid it. When such societies face the crisis, by that time their standard of living, artificial standard of living, has gone so high, and the economic support has sunk so low, it's impossible to maintain the artificial habits of the society, artificial in the sense that they could happily live without them, but they have themselves chained them onto them. They have themselves enslaved them to those habits. That's why I call it artificial standard of life. This artificial standard of life is not only alcohol related, but related to the attitudes of society in every direction. So when this happens, then the Pandora's box is opened, then all sorts of problems begin to raise their heads. Then there is a breakdown in the big banking systems, insurance systems, and this and that. And when it happens universally, all over the world, simultaneously, then this situation is bound to lead to global wars. I have spoken on this at some length during my address in Canada to an assembly of people which was represented by all walks of life, right from the central minister down to the level of most intellectuals of the schools, colleges, etc. And if it's published, we could offer you, if you're interested in the subject, we could offer you that small booklet like something. It's not a pamphlet, but it's a small, it's a reproduce of what is said. There I have built this theme, which I am just now building, which will, I hope, prove to you, as it proved to the audience there, and they nodded their heads in affirmative, they stood up one after the other, fully supporting the view I had expressed. Politicians are all alike, I mean. Then you will see the hidden dangers of a social pattern which is fundamentally wrong. So alcoholism is one of those features which is responsible for so many evils of the society. And not only the cruelties committed against women and the children under alcoholic influence, but also the whole style of life of an alcoholic society, particularly at the low level, becomes so dirty and filthy. The houses are not properly built and taken care of because the money mostly is drawn by the alcohol to keep up the habits, to maintain the habits. And so much is spent, and when the women follow suit as well, then imagine what would happen to such houses and families and children. I have seen that myself in America. In like you have a Soho area there in New York, right in the middle of the New York. What's the society called? Where?
Harlem.
Harlem. In Harlem, I watched with my own eyes streets full of children in the streets like urchins, without any care. They fight with each other, they shriek and do this, and the women with the bottle of wine held by their side, sitting on their own doorsteps. And there I saw in one representation by some group which was against this sort of life, a film fully supported by facts that many a times these people here suffer unimaginable miseries because of alcoholism, because they are women who kill their own children under the influence of alcohol, smash their heads against the walls. There are men who return to such broken homes, to the hell of their broken homes, further aggravated by what they see. They sometimes are, so cruel to their wives that many a murder takes place almost daily in New York under the influence of alcohol in such poor societies as I am describing. So I believe that if you look at the totality of the situation, then of course you should be convinced that alcoholism is not to permit alcohol or to promote drinking of alcohol is not for the ultimate good of any society. If you withdraw from this habit, you're not hurt much, I assure you. It's only the false addiction which creates the impression that you can't live without it. Those who do not drink alcohol, they know they're missing nothing. they are more peaceful, they are more contented, and also they save much more from their from their monthly incomes than those who drink alcohol, so that they can spend it in house building for the welfare of the children, etc. So this is all I have to say in answer to your question. Whether I could convince or not, this is not for me to decide. I have only to give my honest opinion concerning the questions asked. Thank you. Please.
Many tensions and hostilities between different communities in London now.
Yes, I know.
What can your community suggest to be done in London which would help alleviate those?
Sorry. They belong to different areas, like racism and things, and snobbish attitudes, raising their heads again after the collapse of Berlin Wall and the political situation created as a result in the world. Return to religious, not values but dogmas, and the distancing between different religions of the world in the areas of dogmas and doctrines and you know, the relationship with God is what is highlighted, not practical relationship but the ideological relationship. So I am defining this because then you will know what I mean. This is dangerous. This is one of the sources of trouble. And then, of course, racism, apart from racism, there are ethnic groups which invite problems because of some sense of depravity or whatever they suffer from. When they are together in larger numbers, they gain a sense of strength, and then they defy the values of the society, of the people, the value of the people of the country who own the country originally, and they have come over, although they have been naturalized and so on, but they still do not belong to the roots of the country. So the differences begin to appear because of some misbehavior of the society towards them and some counter misbehavior of the people towards the society. So when they become together in larger groups, then the sense of inflated power makes them completely irresponsible, because their leaders think now that with this following, this mad following, uneducated following, unruly following, we can pressurize the whole society around, we can take our revenge and so on and so forth. And the police has a very big task at their hand, which they try to achieve through brutality, because they think that after all they are not the English. If we treat them with brutal force on the plea that they are brutal to us, then the people as a whole will understand it. There will not be that strong reaction against this as if we had done the same to the whites in England. And with that theoretical protection in their mind, psychologically they are prepared for much greater brutalities than they would ordinarily permit themselves to do. So this is an area. Again, the drug and alcoholism and the lack of proper attention to the unemployed youth is also creating immense problems. The housebreaking, the mugging, etc., etc. Many of them are drug addicts. Many of them want alcohol for themselves, they cannot buy. Many of them want what they call the music records or the pop music, etc., albums, I think. Yes. They want new albums and this and that. And they can sing and pop their life away just in imaginary pleasure, elating their soul into something which is unreal. These are some of the factors, not all, which are creating this sense of unrest and growing lack of peace. So they should be taken up separately in their own particular area with relevant context to what is happening around them. And one after the other, if you take these problems on merit, then you will realize that a lot has to be done in the area of legislation and the attitudes of the British people to many problems they face today. And this is not the work of one single political party, because the political parties always are interested in gaining something out of a situation. So if the underlying demand, which is unseen and unworded in the hearts and minds of the British people, is to chuck the foreigners out, to smash those who raise their heads against society, then the political voice will be in tune with this inner voice, and things will go from bad to worse. Only such wise decisions can be taken on a platform which is representative of the entire country. If the wise heads are gathered from all political parties and they jointly, not for the gain of, not for the sake of gaining mutual advantage over others, only then they can perhaps come out with very sensible solutions which may not work immediately, but they will have certainly some effect on the future. But the very first step has not been taken. Legislation is the only means available to you, and the legislation without understanding the root causes of problems will always be misdirected and will further aggravate the position. Now recently I heard that the police has been given permission to search anybody without being responsible, without being answerable to any authority as to the reasons why they initiated this. The consequent mishandling is not what I am talking about. The permission to initiate inquiry in relation to any civilian, whoever he is, however he behaves, whatever reputation he has, and to search him bodily, is according to some an answer to this problem of carrying knives and things and things. There is no answer at all. Those who carry knives, they would carry knives. Those who have to search larger number of people will be wasting their time barking the wrong trees. And the attitude of, this arrogance and haughtiness which will be created in the police, which is already suffering from this so much, will be non-productive. It will create reactions against the police, and the police will respond with greater brutality. The result is that as already we noticed, there is a drift between the police and the common people of the British, the common British people, which was unheard of around 30 years ago, which is growing. So on the one hand, your generation gaps are growing, on the other hand, your gaps between your real life and the religious expectations of you are growing, and then the gap between the law enforcing agencies and the law abiding people is now being permitted to grow. And amazingly, they take haphazard decisions for certain crimes which happen. If somebody shoots somebody with a revolver, the fault is that of the revolver, not that of the person who does it. So we draw revolvers. If somebody shoots anybody with a gun, then we draw guns. It's so stupid, I believe. With the due forgiveness, the due pardon to whoever is responsible for this. Imagine the murderers are not dependent on any particular weapon. They are products of distorted psyches. Psyches are not distorted without any reason, because God has created all humans on the same single psychic pattern. So if something is happening elsewhere and that is resulting in a misbehavior in a different area but connected area, then you blame the dancing hall rather than the dancer for wrong steps. Is extremely stupid. It won't carry results. People can strangle others, stronger people, with their hands. They can do damage in so many ways that it's impossible for the society to stop them physically offending the rights of others unless they are reformed, unless measures are taken in the area of reform, where legislation should be made so that you become more responsible yourselves, and the rights of the poor are defended better than before, where the forlorn people of the society, the youth which is drifting away from the noble traditions, should be watched, and before they commit a crime, proper care should be taken of them. And this happens at the school level among the children, whom the teachers can never fail to recognize that there is something wrong with them. If at the right time such people are endeared and found out from them just by loving questions as to what is happening, a lot of damage could be avoided to the society by these children who, if left unattended, would grow into distorted and threatening personalities later in the future when they become adults. So there are so many things which require proper attention, and our community is helping with the help of this MTA, during my sermons, during my question answer sessions, during other programs of the community. We present to the world a healthier picture, where you, without spending much, without the accessibility to the means of coercion, you can still bring about handsome changes in the behavioral pattern of man all over the world. The advanced society or less advanced is immaterial. We are creating specimens of Ahmadis who know how to behave, not because of the fear of sword against them, but the respect of goodness. This is the only healthy attitude which has to be inculcated in the society before you can hopefully expect them to return to a more better, noble behavior. Thank you. I think the time is up. You see, these discussions with particularly with the school and college intellectuals, and they're almost all of them are intellectuals, I must say. The level of intellectual thinking in your educational institutions is very high, and it is where that you can still take pride. But because of some of the evils we have been discussing, when you are distorted in your attitudes, in pleasure seeking, etc., you can no longer remain intellectual, of the right order, I mean. So the society of the British teachers and professors is also, unfortunately, being corroded in the area of morality. If you somehow stop it, then I must pay you the tribute of being a society which should be proud of its unbiased intellectual attitudes. So that is why I always tell the Imam Sahib, thank you for giving me this opportunity of having a discussion with British school teachers and professors, etc. It's always enlightening, and I gain more than they can gain from their visit to me. With that, I thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you.